Whistles and sirens that are blasting out at her. Union Castle's liner Balmoral Castle has now joined in this symphony of sirens. It's a moment that's lifted everybody to their feet. Hats and sticks are being thrown in the air, and there can't be many people anywhere in the country who aren't glued to their radio sets for moment-by-moment description of this greatest of maritime events. There'll no doubt be a lot of very happy emotion and lumps in people's throats right now. Flying boats take full advantage to get a bird's-eye view of this spectacle. At last, the Queen Mary has found the open sea. This may well be her maiden voyage, but those boat drill regulations still have to be complied with. After that, it's plain sailing to the only call en route to America, the French port of Cherbourg. The international financier J.P. Morgan's $2 million yacht has been shadowing us on our way to Cherbourg, but there's no French reception to greet us. However, nothing is going to spoil this great day. Suddenly the sounds of Rule Britannia have been coming from a small English ship which has crossed the channel to show the flag. The Mary is belching a cloud of very oily smoke, which unfortunately has just happened to billow away on the breeze towards the town, accidentally, of course. Here, and we're not meant to know this, £2.5 million of gold bullion are being taken aboard. And there's a very pleasant surprise. There are some French admirers. They've delivered the very finest champagne to be presented to every passenger aboard as a gift from one of France's finest vineyards. We left Cherbourg in the middle of the night, and now we're fully up to speed, and the sea looks like it's seething and boiling as those quadruple propellers are driving us ahead, passing Bishop's Rock, and then out into the vast Atlantic Ocean. This is where the Mary is going to show her greatest qualities. Each weighing some 35 tons, the four propellers, made from Turveston castings, are the largest that have ever been made. They're driven by 4 sets of quadruple expansion reduced gear turbines, each having 257,000 blades, all hand set. Developing 50,000 horsepower, they turn at 3,000 revs per minute. All this power means that the Mary can reach speeds in excess of 30 knots and maintain a service speed of 28.5 knots. Now let's take a look around, starting with the communications centre. It's equipped with the very latest technology. Look at those huge transmitter valves. The Queen Mary has 2 radio stations. This one is on the Sunday, and 5 radio operators are handling a tremendous amount of traffic. On the very first day, they've dealt with 120 calls to South Africa, Australia and Canada. One caller excitedly told anyone who cared to listen that she'd heard her dog barking at home in Australia. On B-deck, here's Miss Turner at work. She's the supervisor of the ship's 700-line telephone switchboard. It's the largest ever installed in a liner. Even the wealthiest of seasoned travellers are eagerly experimenting with the thrill of using the telephone at sea. For the first time, they can telephone just about anyone and anywhere, and they are doing. There's been a lot of calling the purser's office or picking up the white telephone in their cabins and phoning their fellow passengers. The Queen Mary's captain, Sir Edgar Britton, has had to impress upon Miss Turner not to put any calls through to his cabin unless of great importance. Otherwise, he said, he'd be spending the whole voyage just answering calls from his passengers. The purser's office is a centre of constant activity, both for passengers and for the running of the ship. The chief purser acts as the ship's host. He's been busy entertaining the rich and famous in his cabin, which acts as a social club where the many celebrities can meet. The assistant pursers are responsible for everything from arranging ship's concerts, sports meetings and tournaments to the more exacting job of satisfying all sorts of passenger demands, some of which are proving to be pretty bizarre, to say the least. The purser and his team are responsible for the passengers' 350 mini-safes, as well as compiling the ship's manifest. This is a complete record of every passenger and member of the crew, all of whom, when they came aboard, had to fill in a form of full personal particulars. And this has involved a huge amount of typing up and many late nights to complete all those manifests ready for the port authorities in New York. The ship's bank is a branch of one of the big high street banks and can handle every kind of financial transaction. You certainly don't feel claustrophobic aboard. The Mary has 38 public rooms. This is the main lounge on the promenade deck. It's 96 foot long and 70 feet wide. As with all the interior design, it's decorated with the most magnificent marquetry. There's a fully equipped stage and parquet dance floor. The mirrors add greater depth, and over 50 types of wood were used for the exquisite veneering. Some of these have never been used before. It's early in the morning, and few passengers are about. The shopping centre is only just opened. This is the Burlington Arcade of the ship, with many famous West End names. Mrs. Beggs has put the final touches to her window display, and is ready and waiting with, among other things, Spanish dolls at 10 guineas each. There are 22 lifts aboard connecting with the other decks. For those who are concerned about keeping fit, they can always exercise up and down the 6 magnificent staircases from C deck to the gymnasium on the sun deck. In place of honour on the grand staircase is a plaque commemorating the ship's launching. It's been the first time in history that a ship has been graced with the name of a living queen. There are 2 indoor swimming pools aboard under the care of Miss Dand, 6'3" and still beautifully tanned from her previous voyage on the winter cruise. This is the cabin class pool. The Mary's shown an early tendency to roll, so diving in the pool can be a risky business, especially if the diver has one eye on Miss Dand at the same time. In really rough weather, both the swimming pool and therefore Miss Dand are strictly out of bounds. Those who are determined to end the voyage fitter than when they started it can take advantage of the regulation-sized squash courts. These have been in constant use. If you just want to walk, the Mary's alleyways or companionways give you that great feeling of generous space. The more expensive cabins really are the last word in luxury and comfort, lined and panelled in woods of exotic species from forests all over the world. If all this expense has been making you ladies hot and bothered, you can cool off by turning up the latest in compact ventilators, and then use the white telephone to make that important appointment for a manicure at the beauty parlour under the charge of Miss Graham. For the men, there's a hairdresser's to rival any in the world. This is run by Michael Arnold, who, together with his fellow barbers, offers a complete West End service, including tips for the winner of the Derby and what the ship's noon-to-noon mileage will be. The largest room ever built in any ship is the Mary's cabin-class restaurant on C deck. It's 160 feet long, 30 feet high, and the entire breadth of the ship. 800 passengers can be seated here in complete comfort, leaving ample room for the waiters and staff to provide a service that's second to none. The galleys prepare 10,000 meals a day from vast stores that include 70 tons of meat, 20 tons of fish, 20,000 pounds of poultry, 100,000 pounds of vegetables, and 70,000 eggs. On the menu it says you can have anything you want. One of the guests at the captain's table is a lowly Cockney lady turned millionairess. One day she said to the waiter, "Here, Mike, I'd like fish and chips wrapped up in the news of the world." Undaunted, Mike scoured the crew's quarters for the newspaper and returned with great aplomb to present the delighted gourmet with her fish and chips wrapped in the newspaper, together with a large bottle of Sarson's vinegar. After dinner, there's dancing in the main lounge, and on this maiden voyage, the BBC is doing live broadcast featuring one of the nation's biggest radio personalities, Henry Hall, and his orchestra.
That concludes the program of Dance Music, played to you by the BBC Dance Orchestra, directed by Henry Hall. Goodbye, everyone. Goodbye, and here's to the next time.
On board, we have a rich variety of passengers, from famous celebrities and prominent people to just very ordinary travellers with the good fortune to have a ticket for this, the most important of maiden voyages. There's been a lot of promenading with people hoping to catch a glimpse of one of the Mary's many celebrated VIPs. The first daily tote on the ship's noon-to-noon run has been won by Mrs. Hillman, who collected the tidy sum of £833, enough to buy her a couple of decent motor cars. In the cabin class section of the ship, passengers preparing another little flutter, this time on the traditional shipboard sport of horse racing. The decks are alive with all manner of activities. Down in the tourist class, there are boxing matches for eager young contenders, with more punters trying to win $1 or two. The Mary's bridge reflects her size and is equipped with the very latest technical and navigational aids. It's here that the Commodore of the line, Captain Sir Edgar Britton, keeps watch over the safety of all aboard and, of course, of the mighty Queen Mary herself. She's been built using over 10 million rivets and sufficient steel plating to build a highway 100 miles long. She has over 2,000 portholes and windows, 12,000 light fittings, 10 miles of carpets, 200,000 pieces of crockery, 100,000 pieces of china and glass, 30,000 sheets, 21,000 tablecloths, and 210,000 towels. She has enough refrigeration plant to meet the needs of 15,000 homes, and her funnels are so large they can accommodate 3 giant steam locomotives the size of the Coronation Scot. Down below decks, the Mary's chief engineer, Llewellyn Roberts, also has tremendous responsibility, maintaining her massive engines and making sure that nothing will interrupt our voyage across the Atlantic at speeds reaching over 30 knots. The Mary also has basic automatic steering equipment, which helps to relieve some of the pressure on the bridge. This is the gear that actually controls the rudder. Also on the bridge are the controls for all the ship's safety doors, showing whether they're open or closed. In an emergency, any of these watertight doors can be shut by remote control from the bridge. This makes it possible to divide the ship into a number of self-contained watertight compartments. Experts claim that the Queen Mary could be cut in two and still continue to float. As the coast of America draws ever closer, the Travel Bureau is busy supplying passengers with all the information they need ashore. There's been no let-up in the sheer volume of cablegram traffic to and from the Mary. So much, in fact, that many messages are still likely to be left undelivered after our arrival in New York. The radio officers are also responsible for picking up the BBC News and relaying it to the public rooms.
BBC World Service presents radio news for you.
There's even a fully equipped laboratory aboard in the charge of a qualified chemist who not only works with the surgeon, Mr. Butler, but also ensures the purity of the ship's water supply. All luxury liners have their own printing press and most publish their own newspaper, but the Queen Mary has a complete printing works with the very latest equipment, enabling it to produce a whole range of printed matter from ship's menus, competition lists, cocktail invitations, and of course the Queen Mary's own newspaper, the Ocean Times. With all those famous people and the daily hubbub of shipboard living, there's plenty of local news to report in addition to what comes in from around the world. Today is Saturday the 30th of May, and the headline for the Ocean Times is that the Mary has covered 766 miles. That's a record-breaking day's run on the westward Atlantic voyage. But though the capture of the Blue Ribbon does now seem possible, it's by no means certain, because we're now approaching the Grand Banks, where the cold current borders on the warm Gulf Stream. The climate will soon change, and the Mary will sail into thick, cold fog. People are making the most of what's left of the decent weather. It won't be long before the deck's empty and the Mary's mighty fog siren is booming out every few minutes. Tonight is going to be one that Charles Chislett will never forget. He's been invited to a private showing in the Miniature Theatre of a film of the launching of the Queen Mary. As the audience relives that great experience, sitting in the very heart of the focus of that film, they'll hear the deep, warning boom of her voice above as the ship ploughs on at a more cautious speed. Unbeknown to the passengers, when they come to the area where the Titanic had sunk, a wreath will be dropped overboard quietly and without ceremony into the deep, cold waters of the North Atlantic. The general feeling now amongst the passengers is that the change in the weather will put paid to any attempt to capture the Blue Ribbon on this voyage. But life aboard goes on as one endless party, everything of course in the best possible taste. Now, early in the morning on our fourth day at sea, comes the first sign of the big New York welcome that we're going to get. While we're still 100 miles from land, an American newsreel plane is swooping low over us. Flying with us against the wind, he overhauls very slowly, and there's a sudden surge of excitement aboard as the Mary's passengers line the decks, waving to the film operator, who's clearly visible, winding away at his camera for